time. And certainly this topic of partnership with the rest of the C-suite is very important, very relevant. So I'm going to turn it over to Derek, and Derek is the CEO, founder, and principal consultant of Gavroche. And when you take him aside, ask him how he got that name for that company, because it's a great story. And Derek and I have been working together with MIT for many, many years. So I know he's a practitioner, he's a thought leader, and he's a great colleague. So with that, Derek.
Thanks, Maria. And back at you. Thought leader, that lady. All right, so welcome everyone. I was looking, there's like 100 people that signed up for this. So where's the other ones? No, I guess they're all online. So hello everyone from online area world. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. It's the 15th, 16th year, right? This is the 16th year that this has been running. And you know what happens at conferences, right? People get up and they talk and they say, man, we did a couple of things really well and we did a couple of things really badly. But overall, we were fairly successful in certain things. And this is what our team looked like. And this is who we reported to in the C-suite. And, that's the kind of gist of what we typically hear, right? But what a couple of us started thinking about is what actually happens behind closed doors when you, as the leader of data and analytics for your organization, are sitting with your boss. What do you talk about? What specifically are the topics that you guys address? Which of those have contributed directly towards making the successes that you achieved happen? There's got to be some kind of pattern that's really starting to emerge there. And we felt like maybe what we should do is try and capture that information and drill into it and unpack it a little bit more so that we can create some kind of set of guidelines or a framework that everyone that's involved in this community at CDOIQ can start using, can start tapping into. And we wanted to make it a living thing that, each year we add to it and we refine it further as things change, as the role of the CDO continues to mature. So that's where we're coming from. That's why we wanted to do this. And today is really the start of a journey. And we're so glad that you guys joined because we want to, tap into your thoughts and get you to give us some ideas. But of course, I also have a learned panel of data and analytics leaders right here with me who are also going to be adding to the discussion. And but before I get into introducing them, I just want to do a shout out to the other people that are on the team that I've been working with to try and start this whole journey. And that is Andy Lambert. Unfortunately, Andy couldn't make it to the conference. Robert Lutton, who I'm sure a lot of you already know. Of course, everyone knows Rich Wang. And Gertrude Gibbs. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us have been trying to work at launching this idea for the last year, believe it or not. And trying to figure out, what's the best way of creating something of value for this community of people. So, here goes. The people that we got, on the panel here, Dan Mears. Dan works at TIAA, used to be called TIAA-CREF, TIACREF, which was a mouthful when I first did a contract there, some time back. And actually, Dan can tell you a little bit more about some of our experiences together. But then we have Tony Cyriac. Tony is out of Schwab, Charles Schwab. And then last but not least is Tom, and Tom Henry hails from Schnooks, which is, we really wanted to make sure that everyone understands as we start this journey that it's not just the finance sector that we focused on. We really want to look at all the different sectors. So, and I'm kind of starting to get around to put a little commercial in here. And that commercial is, we're looking for you and your company to join this movement, right? We want to have a number of workshops between now and next year this time. And we want to have, access to you and your CXO to draw in some of your ideas to make it part of this framework as well. So it's definitely not just the financial sector. It's much broader than that. So, as we go through this, if, the lights start coming on for you, make sure that you email us, either Robert Lutton or myself or whoever, and volunteer to join, the whole movement. And let's refine and create something really good. So, let's jump right into it, shall we? I guess, going back to something I mentioned earlier, what happens behind closed doors? What happens when you, as the leader of data and analytics, send an email to your boss? What's the content of that email? What's the subject line of that email? And the response you get back, what's the content of that? What are you talking about? When you speak on the phone, what are the words that you're using? What are the words that your CXO is using back to you? When you're sitting in your CXO's office on a face-to-face, what are the words that are coming out of your mouth and out of your CXO's mouth? If we were to take all of those words, all the communication that's going backwards and forwards, and toss it into a word cloud app, what would pop up? So, that's our opening question to each of the panel.
Do you want just one word?
Let's go with three.
I mean,
Three phrases.
three phrases, okay.
Yeah, three phrases. Tom.
Yeah, I would say business value would be first. We talk sales, we talk margin, we talk how we're going to monetize our data assets. We talk remarkable customer experiences, right? How are we using the understanding of our market to provide the Schnook customer with the best possible experience? Obviously, our competitors like Walmart, quite a bit bigger than we are. We have to punch a little bit above our weight by knowing the community. And then the third is igniting innovation. Specifically our CEO made that statement to me. He's like, we want you to teach us about kind of the art of the possible within the data and analytic realm. Specifically, everybody wants to key on AI and what it can do for us, but ignite innovation throughout the entire executive team.
Very cool. Yeah. So a number of different but interrelated threads there that would come up as the big, bold phrases on the word cloud.
And you'll notice, I was thinking about this as you were talking, I've been to this conference several years. I'm getting old. But we talked data governance, not long ago. We were talking data management, offense, defense, data literacy. Now we are talking business value.
Yeah.
Right? That's where we're going to have our biggest impact in the organization. So I didn't say data governance. It's value-oriented discussions.
Yeah, and it's more, to that point, it's more kind of business-focused as opposed to techie speak or data geek speak, So, yeah, interesting. Tony.
Yeah, interesting question. I was just trying to make the word cloud as you were asking the question. So I think, word cloud means high frequency that appears, right? So the highest frequency clearly would be the word data that appears because there's a lot of that conversation, which is around data-driven experiences. And how are we driving insights in our client experiences, making it delightful, and that's kind of the big one that appears always. Right. Particularly in our case where I, as a chief data analytics officer, report into the chief digital officer of the company. So we are constantly in this discussion on how is the insight pushing forward the experience for our clients, and how can we do more and more of that, better, faster, cheaper, right? That's the one. The second one I would say is client, very client-focused company. I think everybody says that, but I think every time there is a question from my boss about what does this mean for our clients? Mm-hmm. Can you tell me that? Because that's what we need to do, tell everybody here. Otherwise, this doesn't move forward. So talk to me about what does this mean for the client. So the word client would certainly appear as a big one. Mm-hmm. And the third one I would call out is talent and team. So there's a lot of time we spend on how are we doing with our talent? Are they feeling kind of energized? Do they feel excited? Do they have the tools to do their jobs well? How is the engagement going with the team? And also the broader community of talent inside Schwab in terms of people and consumers of data, and is it getting easier for them? Because we constantly see the need for, I think this may be an interesting point, which is that engagement surveys of employees now show data and access and speed to data as a key point. And there are conversations in that topic too. So I think talent is another one I'd call out as a third one. Yeah.
Very good, very good. And what I've also found interesting about your top three is, so often the role of the leader is being titled Chief Data and Analytics Officer. Mm-hmm. And yet, the analytics piece doesn't necessarily come up strong, which I think is wonderful, because it, so often you get people who get so, enthralled with the analytics space that they neglect the data, and they don't realize that actually you've got to do something about the data, otherwise your analytics is worth nothing. So the emphasis that comes up for you on the data side, I think, is very healthy, because I've spoken to others, and I'm sure some of us have as well, where people are, oh yeah, I'm chief data and analytics, and all they talk about is the analytics piece. It's like, you're missing the point here. Yeah, interesting. Dan.
So two disclaimers. Thank you for letting me go last, because my first word cloud would not be something we'd share in public. I am not a chief anything. I'm not a chief anything. I belong on this side of the table. I'm the finance data officer at TIA. TIA is Teachers Insurance Annuity Association. Our job is lifetime income for people who invest their savings with us over time. Carnegie endowed a fund to start us because he saw that teachers in certain situations and nonprofits did not have a path to a secure retirement. So I want to be careful about the fact that I am not a chief anything. I'm glad to be up here, but I'm not in that mode. My clients are the executive team. I report to the chief accounting officer, chief financial officer of the organization, and we have a plethora of financial processing, but we also have the financial data repository and so forth. In fact, the financial data repository, just to finish your thought, is the successor to the financial data warehouse that we architected together for them 12 years ago, 15 years ago. So it worked. Thank you. Yep. Now, three words then, or three terms: issue, root cause, strategic improvement, or innovation. And that's because the person who hired me, and after having consulted there off and on for a dozen years, came to the realization that through the financial transformation that we finished over a 2-year period and I advised on, we had doubled the size of financial data repository, and we're producing watermarked profitability reports for the first time in the organization. Not using the G word, you're right, but that foundation was there. So now what my boss is saying is, I'm calling him, and I'm saying, we're going to have to make an adjustment after the close because a ledger got, because we have a data problem, because somebody was late, because an accounting treatment wasn't applied, whatever, right? We have accruals that we reverse out, and then we don't restart. We have problems. Everybody has these. And his response was, great, I know you've got it operationally. Tell me, is this a new underlying root cause that's being exposed, or is it part of something we already have on our roadmap that we're addressing with a strategic innovation or improvement? That's the conversation. He always is trying to pull me up and say, let's make sure I understand this from the standpoint of, are we solving it? Or is it a stress fracture that's just become evident, right? And don't fill it in with gravel. let's get it on the roadmap and address it, right?
Excellent, excellent. And I'm sure you guys noticed that there's a lot of overlap, actually, but there's some real unique stuff as well in each area. So thanks for sharing that. Maybe I can just take us through a couple of quick slides here. Let's see. Green means go forward. Oh, look at that. There you go. And I just want to, why are we doing this? To maximize the value of your data and create a data-driven culture. So it's all, it's all about helping this community to move towards data-driven culture. Those are the goals. I think we kind of spoke a little bit about that, but, interestingly, our panel members, used the term innovation a couple of times, and that's absolutely where we believe the role needs to focus. And, getting that alignment between the CDO and the CXO. And the objectives, just to reinforce what I said in the intro, we're aiming to create a framework which will be a thinking tool that the whole community can use to think through the direction they want to go, to think through how they should be communicating with their CXO. And I think what we've got in yellow here is very, very important. It's the aim is not to create something that's overly academic, Certainly we're doing this under the auspices of MIT, right? But, so there's going to be some aspects of academia that will also play into how this gets formulated, because we want rigor, in the framework. But the emphasis is not going to be, an academic emphasis. It's going to be pragmatic. This is what works, guys, And so we really want to hear your stories between now and next year, so we can add it to this pragmatic framework that we're building up. Now, we talked about it being a powerhouse, right? And so that's Derek's best attempt at showing you what a powerhouse looks like, right? In the middle is this melding of the two roles, the CXO role and the CDO role, or the CDAO role, or the finance role, leading the data and analytics charge for finance. Whatever the title is, that person plus that person's boss is what we're talking about. That's in the middle. And when those two really get aligned and start firing on all cylinders, electric magic happens, right? And that's the electricity coming out of that central bubble. So I know it's a stretch, but just kind of use your imagination. It's Derek's first attempt.
Can I give an example?
Yes.
Because, as an expert finance data officer, having spent 6 months in the position, I'm in a wonderful position of taking credit for all the great work that the teams I inherited have done. So we have a new CEO who came into the firm after I joined. She's been in 4 or 5 months, I think. Tasunda Brown Duckett. She came from CEO role at JP Morgan Chase in the retail bank. Is very, very well established, very well known. She has town halls on a regular basis. She's a great communicator, the kind of leader that you want to have in your organization. And when she has town halls, she makes sure to spotlight things that have come to her attention that she has benefited from. So that electricity, we got a direct example. She had a town hall a month ago. I didn't see this coming. I didn't know. She had a number of people that she brought up on stage, and she spotlighted, and we had 2,000 or 3,000 people on Zooms and all that kind of thing. And at the end, she stopped and she said, wait, I needed to make another note. We've been working together in the executive committee with our finance leaders, meaning my boss's boss, right? So this is at the top. And she said, and it is resonated continuously. Those electric bolts are there's still a charge in the air a month later. I am delighted by the new profitability analytics I am receiving. Now, my team drove the data out for that. We partnered with our analytics folks. We don't own that, right? But I've gone back to our teams and said, you're responsible for this. She would never have gotten that view if you hadn't done all the work you've done, particularly the last 2 years, to bring 8,000 new data elements in the financial data repository and watermark profitability analysis. She trusts it. That's the electricity
That's
that
huge.
happens when we can pull together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. Great example. Yeah, and so, if the small team that I mentioned, Rich and Robert, myself and Andy and Gertrude, we just stepped back one day and said, okay, all the presentations that we've heard over the last 15 years, and probably the ones we're going to hear this time, have had common themes that have come out. What were those common themes? And we just brainstormed a list of them. And we tried to kind of group them together, et cetera. And that's what we came out with. We think, and this is, to be refined by this community, we think that those are the key things. We think that those are the things that CDOs and CXOs have to talk about. And we want to be able to unpack that. Now, in the space of the 1 hour that we have here together, I can't unpack every single one of these, right? But hopefully those words speak to you. And those are the kinds of things that I think, we're going to constantly come back and refine and add to and maybe wordsmith them. But there should be a lot of information sitting behind each of those when we're done, right? And let me rephrase that, because when we're done, I don't see this as ever being done. I think this is a learning experience for this community, and I think it's something we've got to come back and modify. Every year when we come back, we need to show the next release. This is a whole lot of words here, but in essence, if you look at, let's see, I think this is a pointer. No, it's not a pointer. Where's the pointer? Is that a pointer? Yeah, there you go. If you look at this third segment here, these correspond pretty much to the nodes on this picture, the nodes around it. And it sort of drives a little bit more depth in terms of the words that we're using. So we maintain that this aspect of why are you doing a data and analytics initiative to transform your enterprise? What's the business reason? It can't just be, hey, it's cool to do AI. There's got to be something real from a business perspective. And why now? Why can't we wait and do something next year or 2 years' time? Why do we have to do it now? What's the urgency? The value piece here is all about sustained business value. I think all of us have seen and been in organizations where ROI is the war cry. Well, ROI is interesting, but it's not terribly compelling because it forces you into a mode of delivering something really quickly and then hoping that it's going to continue to actually deliver value. But the main thing is you delivered ROI in the 3 months. Will it continue, or will you turn around and look at it again and it's gone? I think we've all seen those kinds of scenarios. So SBV is more important than ROI. Sustained business value. Are we constantly getting some value out of this? Culture and literacy. We've heard a lot about that, and we'll continue to hear a lot. Data and analytics maturity assessments. We've got to grow our capabilities. Yes, you've got to deliver stuff, but you've got to grow the capabilities, build the muscle in the enterprise at the same time as you deliver. Critical data. Focus on critical data. You can't hit every single data element. You've got to prioritize it. Data governance. We've heard a lot about that, and Tom alluded to the fact that, hey, for the last X number of years, we've talked about that forever.
Against data. I am a proponent. My word cloud didn't include it.
That's right. Absolutely. It's almost table stakes, really. And then you've got privacy, security, and data ethics. my own kind of real interest in that particular thing comes around the data security piece. So often CDAOs and CDOs have said, yeah, well, that's techie stuff, that data security stuff. That's cybersecurity. That's done by the CTO org or the, someone over there. We don't do that because we're chief data officers, Well, I think that's starting to change. And I know Professor Madnick's going to have a session where he's going to specifically explore that. So if you're interested in that, make sure you get that. And then last but not least, integrating with innovation and transformation strategies. Again, to the transformation and the innovation points that the panel has already made around that. So I'm gonna just kind of go back to the Powerhouse picture here. Leave that up as a backdrop as we continue to discuss some of the key things that the panelists have experienced in their world. So on the question of the why and the why now, is that something that resonates with the three of you in terms of, and could you maybe give us a little bit of color around that?
Yeah, I'll start. And this is a little bit, I'm not calling an audible on you, but when you and Andy approached me about participating,
right.
My brain instantly went back to what causes those power outages, right?
I like it.
So, and Randy Bean, if you don't know him, you should read him. That guy's awesome. He writes for Harvard Business Review and Forbes. And he had written an article and cited that the average tenure for a CDO was 2.5 years.
Yep.
Right? So why, if we're going to create a Powerhouse partnership, we can't be either quitting or let go. So why is that? And he cited he cited several things, but three things that I picked up on. One was poorly defined job descriptions. So what is the job description of a CDO? We've already stumbled around CDO, CDAO, CXO, all of these data aspects of the role. So one of the things I hoped we would do over the next year is, as we try to create a spark that is sustainable over time, we have well-defined roles.
Yep.
The second was unrealistic expectations, right? And every one of us are facing that. It's just throw some AI in it and it'll fix it. Yeah. Well, you don't even know if it's the right type of analytic along the curve that you need to solve that problem. But it is important, I think, for us to, as we evolve this role, is to set with the leaders and help them to understand the building blocks and the roadmap to create a data-driven enterprise, which was kind of the tagline, but help that executive team to assist the CDO in establishing realistic expectations for the role.
Right.
And the third was centered on lack of business acumen or alignment, right? So how do we teach, and I don't even know if this was kind of part of the discussion that we want to have with the CXOs across the industry. How do we evolve the CDO into a true business executive?
Yep.
Right? How are we looking, we all love data and love, all of these statistical models and new platforms. The cloud has revolutionized everything. But ultimately, we're in business to create business value. So we have to be business executives too.
Yep.
So I would hope as we try to ignite that spark beyond 2.5 years, that we would focus on kind of those areas. And what's our job description? How do we become really business executives, and how do we set reasonable expectations for our role?
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. Tony, what are your thoughts there?
I took the question more as why a data transformation in a company and why now?
Yes.
More about the creation, not about the model itself being created and we talking about it, I think. So I step back from my experiences or multiple companies. I think it's The first point I would say is I think digital transformation is kind of the core agenda in now most of the companies. I think post the pandemic, even prior to that, but that's become a driving momentum in most firms. And then you think about and say at the core of it is data. And if you don't organize thinking around your data and thinking about how to use it cleverly, it's just not gonna do what digital transformation is intended to do. Because the initial wave of digital transformation was remove friction, get out of paper, and all of that.
Yep.
But that's gone, right? Or there's probably more work to that, but that's gone. The point is now, is there enough from our data that we can use to bring the context in the experience and bring real nudges and value for our clients in that experience as they engage with it. So every touch point of the client with us, how are we putting data into action and gleaning data in a way that is powerful and valuable for the client, right? I mean, that's the kind of push. So to me, that's kind of the why and the why now. The momentum around that is significant, and I think we need to kind of go behind it. And data is now recognized increasingly as the core of it, and that's the why now for me in doing it. It's for the clients, it's for value for the clients, but it is helped with a big transformation agenda that's happening in companies, which is digital transformation in my mind, right? So that's the why and the why now.
Yeah.
There is everything else we have talked about, at the symposium, to your point about governance and how we structure and data lakes, and all of this is in service of that type of an outcome. And are we kind of gearing to that? And then the question is, how do you approach it? I think maybe we can talk about it in a subsequent question of yours. But this is, to me, the answer to the why and the why now. This is about digital transformation, and are we now kind of pushing data and driving the value from data into that transformation effort?
Yeah, just to put a fine point on it, there's this whole thing, data-enabled, analytics-empowered business transformation. I mean, that's really the key, because I think there were a lot of scenarios in the early days. I mean, if we think about the 15-year period that we've had this, in the early part, people were really coming into it from a pure kind of data geek kind of perspective, and not necessarily making the connections between the enterprise transformation stuff that was out there. So eventually you'd have this gap, and to the point you were making, Tom, no wonder there were a lot of people that were kind of only in for 2 years and then out, because they had this big science project on the side, all around doing data, and it wasn't connected to the business needs. And so, I think that's definitely a level of maturity that we're starting to get to, and we're starting to see successes because of the Powerhouse getting together around that point. So, great points made there. Dan?
I'm redundant. You should normalize
Never
me out of the panel. So I would agree with both my cohorts. At TIA, two things. Why? Because while the company is heavily engaged in client relationships, a lot of folks in our company have direct client relationships right up to our CEO on a regular basis. An awful lot of us don't see them. But more importantly, the financial data has become trusted in the organization for use in product modeling, in channel decisions, in digital transformation. We don't have 5 different sets of financial data floating around the company so that each person can kind of come up with their own model. We really use a trusted approach to that, which means that data is the lens through which we view our customers, our markets, our partners, our suppliers, everything, right? And so it's much more important, knowing that that's the lens, that we focus on that data and on supplying that data and adding the richness to that data. So we have 17 distinct attributes that we can add to the financial data flows from across the organization that are standardized at the top of the house. And most of those 17 are not what you would think of as chart block, right? They're very extended attributes that let us dive into an understanding of customer behaviors at the product, at the channel, at the customer type, and so forth level, right? So that's that. Why now? A year ago, we were coming through the last stages of a 2-year financial transformation. We'd really expanded our financial data repository. We had watermarked our reports. We had really simplified our connections to 20 different global ledger systems around the world, all the sorts of things you do, right? And about that time, we decided there was a position that needed to be created to sustain the benefits, the sustained business value, such a huge thing, to sustain the benefits out of that, to restructure our operating model to leverage that, and to continuously innovate that data and be able to produce that to delight our CEO at the end, right? So the position was defined as part of an operating model update towards the end of it, and then posted. And they clearly couldn't find a qualified candidate, so they asked me to do it. But the key is, the why now is about our recognition that we'd done the homework. I love this governance as a foundational thing, right? We'd done the homework to have the data, to be in a position to provide leverage to AI and embedded analytics and all the other things we need to do. We've done some of the work around cataloging, understanding that data, and knowing where it goes and how it's used. Not all the work, that's a continuous improvement loop. But the why now was that we recognized that we had a new executive team coming in with a very aggressive view of how to get to markets and customers, and a very clean, very simple strategy that said, we're about lifetime income. We're about providing very reliable lifetime income to folks. And how are we fulfilling that mission? The financial data turns out to be the way that we can evaluate how well we are fulfilling that, because we're actually tracking people in the financial data at an aggregate level and understanding how the investments are performing for them, where they are in their life cycle, where they're coming in and out, this sort of thing. And I think we all do this in this space, and we need to. So that's the why and the why now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting and insightful. You know, the whole aspect that you touched on there about the sustained value, I think is also another key element, because again, I think, you know, especially in the early days of CDO, everyone was trying to make a big impression on the organization and trying to say, hey, look what we did for you in this last quarter, you know, and there was not much thought given to how we're going to keep this going. You know, we've created some value now, but how's it going to continue to be something that's valuable to the enterprise and it's not going to just fall away? And the whole idea of you know, creating some kind of an architecture that could be scaled up and expanded upon, and you could get more and more value from going forward, was not necessarily something that people were talking about and thinking about. So, you know, that I'd be interested in your guys' thoughts around the whole idea of ROI. Are you finding that when you talk to your CXO and you talk about business value, as you raised, you know, earlier, Tom, you know, how do you measure that value? Is it still, are you still finding yourself in the mode of what's the ROI? Or are there other aspects or different ways of thinking about business value?
Yeah, I was taking a note while Dan was talking, because something he said piqued my interest. I think most CDOs are going to have a portfolio of projects that are going to have to stand on their own legs, right? From an ROI prioritization standpoint. We all have a portfolio. But differentiation, as we talk about competitive differentiation, is going to come through activities that create that sustained business value. And it's generally going to come, and this is where I was taking notes from you, Dan. Maybe you could write a book or something, and I can read
He's
it.
written one.
I'll read
He's
your
written
book.
two, actually.
But it's going to come from activities, partnerships, and iteration, right? And so I'll give you an example of how we do this at Chinook Markets. So we just recently, this is a little bit of bragging, but we just recently were named one of the U.S.'s best run companies by the Wall Street Journal and Deloitte.
Congrats.
Thank you. And one of the small contributions that the data and analytic team has made to that is just the way that we use data to run the company. So on a weekly basis, and in fact, I am missing the meeting right now, and this aligns with what you were talking about, Dan. We sit down with the senior leadership and say, all right, this is what just happened, right? This is what happened last week. And we review it from a financial, a customer behavior, from an employee standpoint, and using predictive analytics. This is what's likely to happen over the next 12 weeks, right? So let's work on tactics that can either improve our projections over the next 12 weeks or address any of the holes that we see or trouble we see on the horizon. And then we build a set of tactics and work those tactics, and they can be anything from a set of personalized offers for a particular pricing zone, or it could be any number of tactics to help kind of address any of the concerns we see on the horizon. But that's an iterative weekly process that we have that has created sustained value. Nice. And it's it is kind of reliant on as I said, the activity, the partnership, the iteration, the innovation. But that's how I see sustained value. But it doesn't mean that we just throw out our portfolios. I mean, we're creating new capabilities that will work their way into these processes of generating sustained value.
Okay, yeah, very, very good, very insightful as well. I mean, that whole aspect of just being ROI driven without a broader kind of thought process behind it is where I think a lot of people have faltered. If they've just got a strict ROI kind of thing, it's very difficult to get off, get off to a good start if you've got that hanging over your head and that's the only thing that's hanging over your head. I mean, just to kind of interject a quick experience that I had when I was chief. I took a little sabbatical of about 5 years out of my consulting role and became a full-time employee at TD Ameritrade, which is now part of Schwab, of course. And the CEO of TD Ameritrade said to me on the first day I started there, he said, Derek, yeah, ROI is important, but what I'm really interested in is every quarter I want you to come tell me what can we do in the business today that we couldn't do 3 months ago. That's what I want you to really focus on. And I thought, wow, I love you. You're a wonderful person.
I do have one more kind of question or statement, but as I was thinking through that question you posed is, the sustainable value is obviously where you want to over-index, if you will, but ultimately it's about driving enterprise-level KPIs, right? Yep. Those are the the guiding stars, right, for the organization. So, that's when I think about sustained value and how we measure it is, are we delivering to what the organization intends to deliver this year?
Yep. Great point.
Yeah, I certainly add on to the points that were made. I love the point about the iterative aspect of being with the business, part of the decision-making process in the business. You are not the supplier of something and sitting in the corner.
Yeah.
You are actually at the table discussing the decisions that are being made and how you could give insights that folks didn't think about and bring that to the conversation, right? So that's kind of the push that we're doing in what we had uniquely going for us was somehow my team does the analytics for every single business, marketing, operations, digital, or retail business, et cetera. So we are in the day-to-day business decisions of, how is client satisfaction looking like today? How is it, where are we trending in terms of our capacity in our call center? So we are in the middle of those conversations every day naturally. So then inserting a few things into that is like the key way to achieve the outcome. So for example, one of the major changes we did on the team was to say, are we bringing proactive insights to that conversation? So it's great to talk about what they usually ask us questions, and here is all the answers to that question. But we know enough about the context in the business. We have so much access to data and see the signals in the data Can we bring us, so we instituted what I call a did you know section in those meetings. So, so it'll be almost like we do the normal conversations, how things are trending, where it's going, all of that, and then say 3 things did you know. So 1, 2, 3 that we see in the data. Is this interesting? Then suddenly it provokes a thought process, which is like, oh yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So let's talk about it, right? That then leads to a thread that goes into a completely different kind of action, and that they were not thinking about in terms of nudging, whether it is through changing the experience, the nudge, the marketing offer, or even shifting the capacity in digital channel versus the call channel that we have, right? So all of that would magically happen in those conversations. So the did you know part was kind of the proactive insight push on my team, which is I push my team to say, you're at the table, that's great, but what's the 3 things that you brought in that they did not ask about, right? So that's kind of one way to do it. The ROI point that you raised and value measurement is still a challenging topic. I think many of us face that, which is how do you exactly measure and show what is happening? So I think I'll give 2 parts or two dimensions. One is, I think the conversation with the business itself on what metrics matter. You know, you kind of assume that you know what are the key KPIs and everybody. Yes, everybody knows in their own verticals, but having the conversation on what metrics really matter for you versus you, and then are these consistent or are you looking at this differently? Yeah. So you are a team that is in the middle who can broker that conversation in a way that others couldn't, right? Yep. And push that. So that's one major point of value that the businesses can see from you, because you could bring perspectives that they haven't looked at. You could push them in a direction that they haven't thought about, and the inter-business or across-business topic of what is overlapping, you could bring that. The other side of, I think, to your point, project-based ROIs are still a reality, and we all have to live by it for the project portfolios we have. So we do that. But we started what I call a higher altitude measurement idea too, which was slightly, we said, okay, every initiative we do, it need not be a project, everything that we do as a team, can we start describing a direct and an indirect value to that? And a direct is where this was the major point in achieving that outcome, whether it was client satisfaction number moving or whether it was net new assets increasing in the company. But an indirect is where we are one of the 35 things that help push that needle. It's okay. You don't have to be specific exactly what we did that grid side. It's a little more fuzzy, but that's okay. Start logging it and bring that conversations every time we have the business meetings, the weekly meetings that you described, right? So that is the push that we are making, but it's very early days to say, you know, it's in great shape, but that's the kind of different approaches we are taking, the project level ROI and the higher altitude kind of direct, indirect measurement idea.
Nice, yeah, and it's all really about managing expectation at the end of the day, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think that multi, layered kind of approach is really where the secret sauce is, So, Dan, thoughts?
I love following these guys. There's no work to do. This is brilliant. Okay. 2 things. Tom nailed it, and it's something that I've faced for years in dealing with business and with IT. It's a portfolio, and it has to true up on this lower altitude. I like that. I'm going to steal that. Approach. But what we've done is we've cheated on the higher altitude side, right? Because I spent a lot of years in consulting, so I'm good at that. So what we've done is we've said, we're going to measure the portfolio. And this initiatives thing is I think, just absolutely spot on. We have a master plan of all of our initiatives. We have a master schedule of all of our processes. The master plan includes things that you would look at and say, oh, that's CPIC. Oh, that's CapEx. Those are projects. Those are, and you've got hard ROI on those. We've got initiatives that are probably more around a little softer ROI, cost benefits analysis. Is this really the right way to get something done we need to do, right? More about people and process, because I find that a lot harder in data. So that's where that thing lives. But here's what we've done on the higher altitude, and I'm going to steal that because I love the thin air analogy I can get out of it. That's actually, it's going to work well, because if I get my executives lightheaded, we might get someplace. So if we look at that, what we've done is we've said we take the enterprise strategy, which is articulated down at the objectives, goals, and some measures at the high level. We've taken it all the way down through the OCFO. We've structured ours so that all the initiatives there are feeding the metrics. at my goals level. But I cheat because it's still hard to get metrics and get, if they live on slides, they die, right? Slides are where data goes to die. So what we do is we step back and say, I got this thing called Jira, right? And you guys have tons of tools, right? It's Noah's Ark. We get 2 of everything. So I got this Jira thing. I put all my initiatives in as epics because Jira will roadmap them for me so I don't have to do slides. I love getting out of that business. And the second thing that happens is all I have to do is have my initiative leads update Jira weekly, and I now have a % complete of strategic execution for the Finance Data Office. I can show how our completion of our initiatives is driving realization of goals and objectives that we committed to at the beginning of the year. And I can do it quantitatively. So I'm going to steal the high. I like that. But it's a portfolio view that we start with and end with, right?
And agile delivery was a godsend to those of us in the data space, because you can quickly deliver some measure of value and then iterate on that using Jira and various other
I just want to get it done before they change their mind.
Right, exactly. Or get something in place and then course correct it.
Yeah, sure. It's less crappy every day, right? Isn't that Six Sigma? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it translates to. All right, look, great points. Thank you for everything that you've given us so far. I know we've got maybe just a little bit of time to take some questions. I know we've got some questions that came through the platform.
Yeah, by the way, you had over about 140 attendees.
Whoa, cool.
Very popular topic. And yes, we've got about 5 or 6 questions. We also want to open it up to the folks here in the room. I would just ask you that the questions that we don't get answered, if you could go back to the platform and make sure that you answer them, because they're all extremely important. By the way, one comment in the chat that I thought I'd share with you. So ROI can also mean reason not to ignore. Right? So that was another.
Yeah.
That was a good one. Risk of ignoring, ROI.
Risk of ignoring.
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah, return on investment. So you
I
want
like
to
it.
You want to do the classroom line?
Yeah, why not? If you guys got any key questions you want to throw at my 3 learned colleagues here.
Or corrections.
Arguments.
And by the way, if you're going to ask a question, if you could go to the mic, that way everybody online can.
Yeah, the 2 mics there on the end.
I'll start
Okay.
with one.
Yeah.
And I'll give you the one that has the highest vote. This had 5 votes. So, what is essential to establishing a CDO position in an organization? Not the CXX side, just the CDO side.
CDO. Well, I think to some extent, if I can kind of, summarize what we've heard so far, and then maybe take it to the next, the panel can take it to the next level. I think what Tom was saying there in terms of, get the role properly defined is, the fundamental thing, right? But then over and above that, what do you all think in terms of the question?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I think it depends on what situation you're being brought into as the new CDO. It's kind of the first 90 days. Are you kind of building from scratch? Are you reinventing those types of things? But I know I don't want to be redundant, but you have to have a well-defined role and a well-defined set of expectations.
Yep.
If you don't have that, you don't have any chance of success, because you really don't have any targets to shoot down, right? And you don't have a scope of responsibility. So without those 2 things, and those are 2 of many, but fundamentally you've got to have a good job description. What is your role in the organization, and what is the expectation of your role to deliver value to the enterprise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think maybe if I can kind of build on that as well, a lot of energy during the first 5 years of our 15 years together in this community was spent on having discussions about where should you report? Should you report to this CXO or that CXO or that CXO? And I think where we've come to, for those of you that are new to the community, I think our collective thoughts at this point in time is, it doesn't really matter which CXO you report to. The most important thing is whoever that CXO is, they need to get it. They need to understand data and analytics and the power that it can deliver to the organization. It doesn't matter if it's the CIO, the COO, the CFO, the CEO, it doesn't matter. That person just needs to get it, because that's when you're going to have the magic. That's when the electricity is going to be really firing. So, just throwing that into the...
Yeah, and if I could add a perspective to the International Society of Chief Data Officers, we just completed the CDO job description, and it's out there as an asset for all of you to look at. Now, it's meant to be customized. It isn't just about every kind of responsibility as possible. What we know, they're all tailored, so this could be an interesting document you can use.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because that is absolutely a free asset. Now, this one more question that had 3 votes. You've got a lot of others, but this one is interesting. Multi-part question. What are some of the unique questions that a CDO can ask a Chief Experience Officer? And how are these questions similar to or different from questions we would ask other C-suites? COO, CFO, CPO, CMO. It's a good one.
Okay. I can see Tony nodding his head, because that's right central to...
Yeah, I think the question, just to make sure, you said Chief Experience Officer, right?
Yeah.
Chief Experience Officer.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it's certainly very much in the way we have operated here in our firm. I think the key point is the experience teams, which is, digital or non-digital, but eventually there's a client segment, there's an experience kind of ownership around that topic, right? They're focused a lot on making it easy, frictionless for people, but what the CDAO can bring to the table is the 3 or the 4 insights in that moment that could dramatically change that experience in ways that they haven't looked about, right? So, and I think the context and the kind of nudge you can bring. A simple example is, let's take a retail client journey, and then somebody was on our website looking at trying to reset password, got frustrated, calls your calls agent. And at that time, the person answering the call, do they know that there was somebody frustrated about the password reset problem, and that you can offer something in that moment, right? Can you bring that context? And I think giving that is that powerful. You ask that question to any experience officer, they'll jump at it. They'll say, yes, I want that. So I want the context across channels. I want what you can tell me from everything you know about that client in that moment, so that my service rep can service them really well. So there are so many such examples. I would say the CDO can throw at the experience owners that they would actually rethink how they design it. They rethink the possibility here.
Great. So I think the person that asked that question, hopefully they've got a good feel for the way that
was a multi-part question, but just to kind of throw one more in, because I know we're running out of time. If you had to choose a CXO to partner with, right, you had limited resources, which one is the most important to form an alliance? And that'll be your kind of final question. Is there a favorite?
Is there a favorite? I mean, Todd Schnook's probably watching this as CEO.
Yeah.
All your CXXs are
The chief executive officer is I would say the one that, when you sit down and you're talking about the value that you can create for the enterprise, or the expectation of this role, because, CDOs are, an investment. Having their kind of approval or not on your charter, your strategy, your roadmap, and kind of the expected outcomes is very important.
I would say your own boss. Because at the end of the day, I think that partnership has to work really well. Otherwise, things don't move, whoever that is, right? And I think that's very important. The seat at the table and the conversations and the brainstorming is very important between those two.
I always like the CFO because they have money. So I like the CFO. Derek, do you like to kind of close up here?
Yeah. I guess really the key thing is thank you very much, guys, for your participation and throwing some ideas around to get us kicked off as a community. Because I think that thing there is where the gold is, you know. I really do think that what happens between the CDO and the CDO's boss is where the magic really happens, because the two of them, if they're 100% aligned, and if they're talking about the right stuff, it's going to fly. The program's going to be successful. You know, and I want to just call out the one key thing that I'm really passionate about. That's the OCM piece, the organizational change management. How do you get adoption? You know, we've talked about innovation, but how do you get the innovation adopted? You know, and are there specific frameworks that we can build into this sort of Uber framework? We can build in sub-frameworks within each of those nodes that are things that people can adopt and use to try and achieve the goals of each of those nodes in the picture here. So, you know, I think once again, you know, as a community, we have solved world hunger in this session. You know, and to pick up on the point that Tony made to me earlier on today, he said, "Hey, Derek, do you realize that we are doing session 4-2? That's 42. What's 42 about? It's the answer to everything, the answer to life, the answer, you know, so we've figured it all out. Thanks, Tony, for pointing that out. And thank you guys for your participation, and thank you.
Derek.
So now we have a break again for a little bit, and then
Didn't do anything but follow you. It's pretty easy.
at 2 o'clock.
John Tall.
Tina Rosario.